Welcome to your daily dose of sci-fi adventures. New stories dropped every single day. Smash that subscribe button and ring the to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and unlock even more epic cosmic tales. The molten twin suns of Mars were still low on the horizon when Rax Volkers clambered through the rust-crusted gates of New Hope salvage. A fine dust, iron-rich and sharp as powdered glass, coated everything: the pitted corrugated steel walls, the idling wrecks of freighters waiting their turn under the station's dull floodlights. And Rax himself, he brushed a hand across his goggles, leaving a greasy smear. Today, his prize, a leviathan of ancient legend, rested silently at the far end of the yard. The Aegis Threnody loomed like a beached whale, its scarred hull towering 3 stories high. Yet what drew Rax's breath away was not the ship itself, but the gargantuan tire wedged beneath its keel. Black as obsidian and wider than a colony transport tunnel, it looked more like the petrified wheel of a forgotten titan than any piece of technology. Rumor held that it had once belonged to the legendary Orc-class haulers crushed under the weight of a collapsing asteroid belt. But no one alive knew for sure. All they said was that no crane could budge it, and those foolish enough to try often lost both gantry and cargo. Rax paused at the edge of the pit where the tire protruded from the ground, a half-submerged arc of rubber glistening in the sun. He tapped commands on his wristpad, and a software hinted that the yard's ancient security drones were still operational. A small spotlight swung onto the tire, revealing moss-like growths of bioluminescent lichen nestled in the treads, an impossible life form. On the arid red planet, Rax knelt to inspect them, pressing a gloved fingertip to one curious cluster. It pulsed faintly under his touch, as though alive. "Eve," he called into his comm link. "I'm here." "Power levels on the ship," a calm female voice crackled back. "Hull capacitors are at 10%. Main reactors offline. No life signs detected inside the HAB deck. Atmospheric seals are intact, but permeable to standard salvage atmospheres. If you breach the port, expect vacuum spray." Rax rose, dust motes swirling around him like embers in a dying fire. He surveyed his makeshift crew, to borrowed techs from the genset bay. Helmets too large for their heads, Marisol, the yard's chief engineer, tracing finger-exhausted diagrams on a holotable, and Clementine, the port's veteran driller, checking the tension on her plasma cutter. All of them shared the same look of awe and apprehension he felt. "Let's get the ladder up," he said, voice firm. "I want a line on that entry hatch before anyone touches the tire." Through the haze, a skeletal crane groaned as it swung into position. Thick cables clattered against the deck plates as Clementine guided the ladder's base into place. Rax climbed, each rung echoing against the hollow hull, until he reached a rusted hatch bolted shut. He lifted a pry bar, wedged it under the first bolt, and felt the metal give with a screech that set his teeth on edge. Inside, the corridor was deathly quiet. Emergency lights flickered bluish, illuminating walls lacquered in black scorch marks. Panels lay ripped away, wiring protruding like entrails. The air inside smelled of ozone, burnt circuitry, and something fainter, yet unsettlingly organic. Every step Rax took echoed through the narrow passageway. He halted at the entrance to the hangar bay. The cavernous space stretched 50 meters, in each direction, littered with debris-charred crates. Broken crates stamped classified, Leviathan Project, and the skeletal frames of what had once been service drones. At the far end, moonlight slivered through a ruptured skylight, illuminating the tire's underbelly, which seemed to writhe with tangled shadow. Rax snapped on his helmet light and advanced toward a control console mounted on a support pillar. Its screen flickered with half-faded holographic icons. He tapped a sequence, system logs. "Reactor status, last transmissions," the console protested, groaning as data streams sputtered into life. Lines of red text scrolled, "Urt sector engagement. Critical damage sustained. Initiate planetfall protocol alpha. Secure cargo. Leviathan Project. Activate binding module." Rax's pulse quickened. Binding module. His eyes darted to the ceiling, where a maze of conduits and thick support beams cradled the tire above. He crouched to examine the floor beneath, where scorch marks traced arcane patterns. Whatever had brought this ship down had done so intentionally, And the tire was not incidental, it was part of the plan. He pulled a data slate from his belt and jammed it into a port at the base of the console. As the logs downloaded, the hull trembled with a distant thrum, as if the ship itself were awakening from a long slumber. Rax froze. Name unknown. Power offline. How could it be generating vibrations? His breath hitched within his mask. The lichen outside the entry had pulsed. These faint quivers now suggested something far more significant stirring inside. Rax, Marisol's voice crackled through the comm link. We've got gangs of Scav crews arriving in 20 clicks. They must have picked up the signal. They'll be brutal. He peered back through the darkness toward the cavern entrance, the outline of the tire looming like the eye of a sleeping god. Copy that. Hold position. I want this data slate intact. A hiss of escaping air sounded behind him. Rax spun. A triangular hatch at Bay's rear had slid open. Pale shafts of Martian twilight sliced through the gloom, revealing a lone figure, silhouetted in the doorway. The figure raised a hand, half of its face concealed by a rebrother mask. Even at a distance, Rax recognized the battered insignia on the figure's shoulder. Novacorp Salvage Division. Rax Volker, the newcomer, called out, voice distorted by the mask. I thought I'd find you snooping around the Threnody. Don't you know better than to pry where the council said stay away? Rax exchanged a glance with Marisol's voice crackling in his ear. The council's edict had been clear. The Aegis, Threnody carried S-class cargo, a threat too volatile to disturb. Many had perished simply trying to tow the wreck. The town's extraction budget had soared as rumors spread of quantum fallout and dimensional tears, but Rax was no stranger to danger. Scrapping myths for profit was the lifeblood of New Hope Station. He stood, setting the data slate firmly in his pocket. I respect council ordinances, he replied, voice steady, but I respect truth more. You want to leave, good. We clear the field, I get the data, and you walk away. Any trouble, and you'll have Novacorp's reprisal to answer to. The masked figure hesitated, then stepped back. Behind him, more silhouettes flickered into view, scavengers, drawn by the promise of forbidden tech. Rax exhaled, head full of questions he was desperate to answer. Why was the Threnody balanced on a living tire? What secrets lay within Hold 7? And if the council feared its cargo enough to keep everyone at bay, what cataclysm might unfold if it ever broke free? As the scavengers melted into the shadows, Rax turned back to the console. He tapped the final command, download complete. Outside, the suns burned brighter, setting the red plains ablaze. The yard's distant sirens wailed a warning that time was slipping away. Rax clenched his jaw. The day's work was only beginning. Rax Volker's workshop was a claustrophobic cathedral of scrap and circuitry. Overhead, rusted girders crisscrossed beneath a high ceiling freckled with oil stains and scorch marks. Below, workbenches sagged under the weight of half-disassembled hover engines, quantum capacitors, and hull plating. The air smelled of burnt solder and recycled coolant. Here, in the dim glow of flickering neon tubes, Rax set to work decoding the Aegis Threnody's secrets. He eased the data slate into his custom Deca squat, matte black slab of reinforced titanium, wired to a constellation of external drives. The slate's surface pulsed with an otherworldly violet light, as though reluctant to surrender its contents. Rax tapped a sequence of command nodes, jacked into the station's grid, and watched lines of encrypted hex cascade across the holoscreen. System integrity at 93%, Eve reported from the lab's central AI hub. Her voice was a steady counterpoint to the buzzing machinery. We're clear to proceed with decryption. Cut the ambient noise, Rax said, his eyes fixed on the scrolling code. He activated an isolation protocol. The lights dimmed, speakers silenced. Only the hum of the deck remained, a heartbeat echoing through the workshop's shadows. Quarter by quarter, Eve systematically dismantled the slate's encryption ciphers layered deep, the handiwork of military-grade crypto-sequestration. Finally, a banner flashed in stark white, unlocked. Rax exhaled. Pull up the final transmission logs. The holoscreen cleared. In their place appeared a single line. Summary. Final transmission Urt sector. He tapped it. A bleached-out hologram flickered into view, a gaunt, pale officer in Imperial Calm's fatigues. Her face shadowed. Beneath her, a ticker scrolled. Subject, Leviathan Project. Cargo hold 7 sealed. Containment status, critical. Energy signature, Ethereum core. If disengagement jeopardizes the cosmos, bind the vessel to the world. Sacrifices protocol. The image winked out. Rax leaned back, rubbing his temples. Ethereum. The word had haunted salvage lore for a generation, a theorized element. So unstable it could warp time, shred space-time, even spawn microscopic black holes when detonated. Rumor placed its first discovery at the heart of the Gargantuan Nebula, but no one had confirmed its existence until now. Eve, cross-reference Leviathan Project with Imperial R&D archives. Accessing the lab's holotable, unfurled star charts and technical dossiers. Project Leviathan was a joint Imperial Novacorp initiative, circa 2000 to 137. Objective, harness Ethereum as a strategic deterrent. The core was stored in a specialized containment matrix fortified with layered graviton fields and biofoundry. Mesh to regulate quantum flux. Rax frowned. Biofoundry mesh? He replayed a snippet from yesterday's survey inside the hangar bay. Those bioluminescent lichens, embedded around the tire treads. At the time, he chalked it up to an alien plant life. Now, the pieces clicked together. The tire wasn't a relic of hauling rigs, but part of a living containment system designed to fuse with the ship's understructure, absorb excess energy, and anchor the vessel in place. Exactly, Eve confirmed. The binding mechanism referenced in the log is a biological failsafe. The mesh grows into the vessel's chassis, creating a symbiotic bond. Only targeted enzymatic protocols can safely disconnect it without destabilizing the core. Rax tapped his chin. That explains the lichen clusters and why every crane snapped under the load. The tire wasn't just heavy, it was alive. He activated his workshop's augmented reality overlay. A 3-dimensional hologram of the Threnody materialized, wireframe outlines glowing in ghostly blue. He tagged Cargo Hold 7 and zoomed into its underbelly. Nestled within a reinforced cradle, the Ethereum core glowed faintly, an orb of swirling violet energy, locked behind concentric rings of alloy and biogel. Round it, tendrils of the mesh wove through apertures in the hull, coiling like metallic. Ivy, Marisol joined him at the holotable, arms crossed. So the Council's warnings make sense. Disturb that bond, and you risk not only hull breach but a quantum cascade. The core could go critical, tearing open a singularity. Rax nodded. That's why they called it Sacrifice Protocol. If retrieval failed, they'd let the ship crash on a planet, bind it here, let it rest forever. Clementine, who had been inspecting an array of sensor drones in the corner, looked up. Forever isn't much help when the Threnody is pointing at New Hope Station. If this core surges, we're all toast. A hush fell. Rax moved back to his deck, pulling up schematics of his bioneutralizer prototype, the nano-enzyme serum he'd sketched out last night. It was a gamble. Repurposed Martian mycelium strains fused with molecular scissors designed to cleave the mesh without triggering an immune-like reaction. He'd need to field test a small dose on the lichen before risking the core's stability. Eve, he said softly, run a simulation. Dose gradient, diffusion rate, mesh contraction time. I need to know if we can retract those tendrils. In under 30 seconds, within moments, Eve's voice returned. Simulation complete. At a 20% enzyme concentration, full retraction occurs in 24.7 seconds. Above 30%, mesh disintegrates to quickly, risking uncontrolled energy release. 30-second window is tight but achievable. Rax punched a fist into his palm. Good. Prep the synthesis lab. I want samples ready in 2 hours. Marisol tapped her datapad. We'll preload the cranes with dynamic grapplers, low G tension. Controlled pull. Once the mesh retracts, we lift slowly, no sudden jolts. Clementine nodded, eyes bright. And I'll calibrate the plasma cutter to slice any residual filaments that won't retract. If we play this right, the whole thing comes free clean. Rax studied the schematics one last time. Even with perfect execution, the margin for error was microscopic. He replayed the holo console's earlier tremors, the faint hum, that had awakened the ship's dormant systems. Had the core already begun to pulse? If so, they were racing against time. A sudden flash on the workshop's perimeter sensors jerked their attention. Outside, the salvage yard's floodlights revealed 3 Nova's sleek hover trucks emblazoned with the NovaCorp insignia gliding toward the entrance. Their cargo bays bristled with salvage exosuits and heavy-duty winch assemblies. NovaCorps. Coming for a second round, Marisol muttered. They want that core as much as we do. Rax's jaw tightened. Let them try. By the time they figure out how to breach the mesh, we'll have the tire off and the core quarantined in my lab. Then we decide, turn it over to the council or destroy it forever. Clementine slammed her gauntlet against her palm. Let's make history. As the afternoon suns dipped low, Rax and his crew descended into orchestrated chaos, calibrating enzyme injectors, charging grapplers, and configuring emergency isolators. Through the open workshop doors, the gleaming Novas drew nearer, silent shadows against a blood-red sky, and deep within the Aegis Threnody, far below the dormant hull, something stirred a murmur of displaced energy that rippled through the mesh. The heart of Eternium pulsed once, twice, in silent tribute to the minds that would dare awaken it. In the stillness, Rax Volker stood at the brink, eyes aflame with both ambition and dread. The echoes of that final transmission had painted a stark warning. Some legends were buried for a reason, but legends, as he knew too well, were meant to be unearthed in 2 hours. The fate of worlds would hang on the thinnest of threads, and a serendipitous bond between man, machine, and living metal. The morning chill of New Hope Station lingered in the air as Rax Volker's makeshift task force assembled at the perimeter of the Aegis Threnody. Steam curled from the workshop vents, mingling with the Martian dust into a pale gray haze. All around, half-buried crane towers and idle salvage mechs stood silent, as if in watchful anticipation. Today would decide whether freedom or oblivion lay beneath the tire. Rax moved among his crew, his gait confident, but his mind acutely aware of the razor's edge they walked. Marisol adjusted the tension calibrator on the crane's winch, double-checking the load matrix. Clementine knelt by the enzyme injector pods, ensuring each cartridge was primed to blast precisely 20% concentration of bioneutralizer. Eve's luminescent avatar hovered near the ship's hull, feeding real-time diagnostics into every helmet HUD. Status report, Rax barked. Marisol's eyes glowed red in her visor's display. Grapplers online. Dynamic tension set to 1.2. Meganewton's gradual pull profile engaged. Winch motors at 75% capacity. No hot spots detected on structural supports. Clementine's gauntlet-lit gauges blinked green. Enzyme injectors charged. Hydrogen peroxide rinse queued. Cutoff radius configured to meters. Any residual filaments outside that zone get the plasma cutter. Eve's calm tone filtered through comm units. Mesh density readings optimal. Holding pattern stable. If we inject now, filaments should begin retraction within 12 seconds, fully severing at 24.7 seconds. Beyond that, risk of uncontrolled disintegration increases by 40%. Rax nodded, swallowing his anxiety. Remember, slow and steady on the lift, no sudden jerks. He stepped to the control console and tapped the holographic interface. A 3-point tether line lit up in amber, one grappler at 3 o'clock, one at 9, and one directly overhead. 3 massive cables snaked out from the crane's pulley, each ending in a spider-clawed clamp that glowed with magnetic seals. Injector. Charging in 3, 2, 1. Clementine counted down. A hiss echoed as the enzyme serum sprayed along the inner lip of the tire's treads. Thousands of microscopic droplets caught the light before splashing down into the mesh. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, then the tire shuddered. 12 seconds, even-toned. The first filaments quivered, like giant metallic vines sensing a threat. They twitched and uncoiled, retracting slowly into hidden sheaths along the tire's hub. Rax watched the retraction percentage tick upward on his HUD. 15, 30, 50. At 23 seconds, a wave of motion rippled across the tire's rubbery surface. The mesh, once invisible against the tire's black expanse, peeled away in sinuous strips. Sparks danced where the enzyme severed the bonds. Rax keyed the lift command. Lifting, gentle pull starting now. The winch motors hummed, cables tightening. The tire groaned, a deep, resonant sound like a beast waking from slumber. For a moment, it seemed to resist, as though every fiber of the mesh strained to hold fast to the ship's undercarriage. Then, on Rax's screens, the tension graph smoothly crept past 100 kilonewtons into the safe zone, but disaster struck. A shrill metallic scream pierced the air as one of the grappler clamps ground against a hidden flange Rax hadn't anticipated. Marisol's console blared in alert. Structural compromise at anchor point 2, tether integrity dropping. The cable's tension spiked uncontrollably. Rax's heart pounded. Abort lift. Already retracting, Marisol yelled, hitting the release switch. But the cable had seized. The grapple held fast, the tire held fast, and now the ship shuddered violently overhead. Plating buckled. With a thunderous crack, a wave of vertigo washed over Rax. Dust fell from the girders above. He staggered back against the hull, helmet lights swinging. Clementine, cut loose that clamp. He shouted. She fumbled at her cutter, sweat leaking from her brow even though the Martian air was frigid. A beam of coherent plasma lanced out, slicing through the clamp's magnetic seals in a hiss of superheated metal. The cable sprang free with a snarl, retracting rapidly into the winch. The tire settled back onto the ground with a reverberating thud that rattled bones. Rax's comlink crackled. Damage report, he ordered. Marisol's voice trembled. Grappler to destroyed. Hydraulics ruptured. Probable frame warp in the crane arm. We're down to 2 anchors, both at 50% capacity. Clementine's voice was tight. Enzyme concentrations dropping. Mesh retraction halted at 76%. Some filaments aren't letting go. Rax clenched his teeth. The core pulsed somewhere just inches above their heads, oblivious to their struggle. He could already hear the distant hum of Nova-class salvage ships. Approaching Novacorp reinforcements moving to claim the prize. Time was bleeding away. He closed his eyes briefly, forced his mind to the earliest data slate entries, the ominous council directive. Bind the vessel to the world. The Leviathan tire was more than a lock. It was a guardian, a living sentinel that would not be pried apart by steel alone. He opened his eyes. New plan. He said, his voice carried a heavy calm. We treat the biofilaments as living tissue, not dead metal. Eve, override the reactor circuit, divert 5% of power to the injectors. Step concentration to 25%. Let's see if we can soften those holdouts without frying the mesh. Eve hesitated. Power diversion will temporarily spike the reactor core's waste output. Risk of core thermal fluctuation 50%. Do it, Rax insisted. We have no choice. Below deck, the reactor whined to life. A surge of violet energy crackled along the conduits feeding the injector nodes. The enzyme spray renewed in a denser fog. This time, the filaments pulsed more violently, and then, much to everyone's astonishment, they responded. Hot, glistening sap-like residue oozed from the severed junctions as the mesh relaxed its grip. On Rax's HUD, retraction hit 95%. The remaining threads quivered, then snapped cleanly, recoiling into the tire's central hub. That's it, Marisol cheered. Pull again, slow and steady. Rax hit the lift command. 3 cables hummed in unison, tension creeping upward. The tire trembled, then rose to centimeters. A collective gasp emerged from the crew as it floated free. Above them, the Aegis Threnity's underbelly gleamed once more, untethered. The hull hummed a deep resonance that felt almost like a sigh of relief. Rax's chest tightened. With triumph and dread in equal measure, they had done it. They had lifted the bound beast. But as the tire hovered, suspended by cables, Eve's calm voice cut through the jubilation. Warning, unexpected energy spike detected. Ethernium core stability dropping. Estimated time to critical phase, 3 minutes, 12 seconds. Rax's triumph curdled into horror. Round him, the engine bays flickered with warning lights. The core's restraints were weakening now that the tire's living bond was severed. Something fundamental in the ship's containment protocols had begun to unravel. He stared up at the massive orb of energy poised above them and realized the true weight of fear. not the steel cables or the living tire, but the unchained power lying just beyond their control. In the seconds that followed, Rax Volker and his ragtag crew understood the harsh truth of the Leviathan project. Lifting the tire was only half the battle. Surviving what came next would require every ounce of guile, courage, and desperate hope they could muster. The suspended tire quivered like an awakened Leviathan, its biofilaments now dormant, but its form still charged with an otherworldly presence. Below, the Aegis Threnody thrummed with the freed tension of its living bond. Warning sirens echoed through the workshop's rafters, their red lights pulsing in time with the reactor's unstable heartbeat. 3 minutes. Even-toned, voice steady but urgent. Core containment at 42% efficiency. Projected cascade in 1 minute, 50 seconds. Rax Volker's jaw clenched. Round him, Marisol and Clementine moved with crisp precision, arming plasma cutters, checking coolant lines, readying emergency power conduits. All eyes flicked between the rotating violet orb visible through the hull breach and the slider on Rax's handheld console, ticking down inexorably. "We've got to isolate the core," Rax said. He shouldered past Marisol, racing toward the containment hatch controls on the opposite bulkhead. "Help me override the failsafes. We need maximum graviton dampening. Divert every spare capacitor into the field coils round hold 7. Marisol swiped at her datapad, fingers dancing across virtual keys. Sparks danced where her gloves met the console's edges. Metal fatigue from yesterday's tremors. "I'm rerouting external coils. Gravity gradient at 30%, boosting to 60. But it'll fry the local power grid." "Do it," Rax snapped. "We'll ride the blackout." Clementine slammed a magnetic clamp onto the nearest junction box and twisted the power bus lever. The workshop plunged into darkness, punctuated only by the violet glow of the core and the soft blue luminescence of Eve's avatar. At Rax's nod, Marisol executed the final sequence in rapid succession. Hidden coils embedded in the hull's framing snapped to life, bathed the core in rippling gravitational waves, and anchored its flux. A low, resonant hum rose in pitch as the dampening field engaged on Rax's HUD. The core's containment gauge climbed 50%, 65, 78, until, with a sudden sigh of relief that nearly shattered the silence, the needle steadied at 98%, containment stabilized, even-ounced. Critical threshold averted for now. Rax exhaled, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. He turned to the hovering tire, its biofilaments now curled and inert, like a sleeping titan at rest. "Marisol, divert that tire to the quarantine platform." "Clementine, prep the tire's internal matrix for study but leave it intact. We need to understand that bond fully." Marisol flicked the lights back on. One by one, the cranes swung. The cables taut and began lowering the tire onto a reinforced transport cradle. Clementine attached data probes at key nodes along the mesh's hub, each sensor designed to monitor the biometal's regenerative cycles. As the tire touched down with a muted thud, Rax allowed himself a moment of triumph until a distant transmission crackled through his helmet comlink. Static gave way to a cold female voice. "Rax Volker, you are in violation of Imperial salvage protocols. Nova Corp asset retrieval teams en route. Surrender the Aegis Threnody and its cargo, or be considered hostile." Rax's eyes narrowed. He keyed his mic. "Tell your commanders I'll deliver the core once I'm sure it won't annihilate half the system. Until then, no one touches it." He switched channels. "Eve, lock down external transmissions. Marisol, secure all access points. Clementine, arm point defense drones around the perimeter. We're not leaving until the core is safe or until we decide it's too dangerous to exist." Marisol's nod was fierce. "Understood. I'll set up the plasma turrets in the East Bay." Clementine's grin was grim. "Let them try to take on living metal." Eve's soft glow pulsed once. "And I will monitor containment integrity. Should it falter again, I'll initiate emergency jettison of the core into deep space. It's the only way to guarantee safety." Rax met Eve's luminous form, gratitude and resolve shining in his eyes. "I won't let it come to that," he promised. Then he exhaled and addressed his crew. "All right, team. We've bound the Titan. We've tamed the storm. Now we decide what to do with the heart of Eternium. Behind him, the workshop's lights hummed as power rerouted around the new dampening coils. The tire's biofilaments flickered tiny veins of greenish luminescence tracing. Along its rubber-black skin, as if breathing, the Aegis Threnody lay, still, a slumbering giant whose heart beat once more under their watchful guard. In the hush that followed, Rax Volker allowed himself a quiet smile. They had conquered the impossible and uncovered a bond between life and machine that defied every law of physics. But even amid victory, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, for there was no turning back. The Aegis Threnody and its living tire were theirs now, and with them, the power to reshape worlds. The choice before them was stark: harness that power for good, destroy it before it could be misused, or guard it forever in silence. Rax glanced at the stable containment gauge, then at the waiting faces of Marisol and Clementine. In the soft glow of the lab, he saw their shared resolve. Together, they would decide the fate of the Leviathan project and perhaps the future of 1,000 worlds. He squared his shoulders. Let's get to work.